All right, so taking angles and lines one step further, we're now going to look at congruent and similar figures. We're going to use a lot of the stuff we learned in last unit to help us out proving or verifying if figures are congruent or similar. So lesson 1, we're going to talk about the congruent figures. Now, what does congruent mean? Okay, it means the same size. This is true for both sides and angles. All right, it looks like an equal sign with a squiggly on top. Two figures are congruent if and only if all of their sides and angles are the same size. Now, what I personally had a problem with when I was in y'all shoes going through Math 2, or it was Algebra 1 at that point in time, it was labeling triangles. I had a hard time using CPCTC. It wasn't until college that I, kind of figured out a way to understand it. Now, what CPCTC stands for is corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. All right. So basically, corresponding, remember, is angles that go with each other, sides that go with each other. So if a part goes with another part in another figure, then it's congruent, or it's the same size. Okay. Down here in these figures, we want to look at how sides have different amount of marks going through them. So like right here, I may only have one. I have one right here. This angle, I have one, where these sides I have two. Okay. Now, in math, if you see angles or sides with the same amount of marks, then they are said to be congruent. All right. So very quickly, what I'm about to do is highlight the angles. So like VST and angle UTS are congruent because they both have the angle marks with two little lines. So what I say, angle VST congruent to angle UTS. Another one, I have this angle here, this angle here. So angle RST congruent to angle RTS. Remember, when you're naming angles, the important part is your vertex or your middle. And over here on the right, see I have two lines on the side, two lines on the side, two lines on the side, two lines on the side. So this gives me a whole lot of information. I can say that XY is congruent to YZ, is congruent to VW, is congruent to WU. Right, because they all have the same amount of marks. Right now, we don't want to assume things, so if you don't see given information, you can't necessarily assume it unless a couple of things happen, and we'll talk about those here in a second. So the last thing I have are my angles. Angle YXZ is congruent to angle YZX. All right, so that's all the information I have. Now, what I said was you can only assume information under a couple circumstances. Okay? The circumstance is if, okay, so you only add info if the objects touch. All right, a special note, if they touch at a point, you can add an angle, and if they touch at a side, you can add marks about a segment. Okay, so on number 4, they're not touching, so what I see is what I get. And very simple, I'm going to actually color these. I think using color here works a little bit better. So VT tells you where to start. So V to T goes with the first two in the next triangle, so E to G. All right. And then T to U, G to F. And then last but not least, we have U to V and F to E. We have F to E. Your teacher does not know his ABCs. Okay. Now from here, we say angle V. All right, we're told that they're congruent. Angle V is either congruent to 3 options. It's congruent to angle F, angle E, or angle G. If you are told a figure is congruent, the first must go with the first point, the second with the second, and then the third with the third. So V is first, it must go with the first point or the first letter in the other one, which is E. Okay, so that's what makes it kind of easier in a sense. So angle V is congruent to angle E, right? Here's your 3 answer choices. Answer choice 4 is going to say no congruent angles, right? And we know that's wrong because we know triangles are congruent by what we're given. Okay, number 5 is one of those special cases, right? These triangles share, right? This picture shares a side, right? They're connected by a side. So that means we can say that this segment goes with each other. Again, WX to XW. So WX to XW. XY to WK. And then YW to KX. All right. Okay. So YWX. So YWX, this angle right here. So Y was listed first, then W, then X. So Y was last in my first triangle. So the last letter will be angle K. And then W was listed. So X will be listed. And then W. Okay. So K to X to W is this angle. And if you look, you'll see it touches the red line and the green line that I traced around. So as you can see here in number 6, they touch at a point. Okay, so this is going to tell you something about the angles. But, you know, we have UTS. We're talking about angle T. So where's angle T in relationship to the first one? It's in the middle. So it must be the middle letter for the second one. Okay, and that's all it takes for these corresponding parts. Again, not really too difficult. For number 7, again, I'm looking at an angle. Y, it's at the end. It must be congruent to the end letter. Okay. Last but not least, so now you have to come up with matching and making sure that your marks in both your angles and your segments match up with each other. Okay. Now, what's cool about this is that there's a million different ways to write it. So I'm just going to say triangle UVW is congruent to triangle, and I have WT, S, TSW, or SWT. All right, here's my 3 options. Again, or no congruent triangles. Now, if, again, you're given all of these measurements and symbols, use them. So U, right, has one mark in its angle. So which angle over here in the other triangle has one mark? T. Okay. So U and T must go together. So therefore, I labeled this triangle starting out with U. My triangle on the right must start out with T. Okay. And now from here, I have 2 options. It could be TSW, which is what I have, or it could be TWS. Okay, so I guess in actuality, there's 5 answer choices. Now, V has 2, S has 2 marks. V is second, S must be second. Because S is not second over here, I get rid of the bottom one, and I'm left with triangle UVW is congruent to triangle TSW. Okay, so not terrible. So now what I want to do is use one that, well, I'll quickly go over here. So again, triangle, I'm going to say ABC is congruent to ABX. Triangle BXA, triangle XAB. A has 2 marks, B has 2 marks. So I start with A, means I must start with B over here. And it's either going to be BXA, or it's going to be BAX. I got those took care of. B has 1 mark here in triangle ABC. A in the other triangle has 1 mark, so I needed 1 mark apiece. Therefore, my answer is triangle ABC is congruent to triangle BAX. Now, in this one, if you look in either 10 or 11, we don't have no ways near as much information as what we had in these previous 2. But because these triangles are touching, we can add in some very important information. So I see a side with 1, a side with 2, a side with 1, a side with 2. These triangles share the line VT. Because they share it, it must be equal to itself. So I'm going to put 3 marks here. Over here in number 11, they touch at this point, and I'm going to say angle D is equal to angle D way back because of vertical angles. Okay? To be able to make progress in these, you must be able to make these 2 marks, right? If they're not touching, you have to go with what you have. If they are touching and sharing a side, you just make a different amount of marks on the shared side. For angles, same deal. Okay. Now, again, triangle STV is congruent to triangles TUV, UVT, or TVU. Okay. S to T has 1 mark. Okay. So S to T has 1. So that means T to U or U to T. So it must be TUV or UTV, right? Because T to U or U to T is the only one that gets me on 1 mark on number 10. All right, and then so I've gone S to T already. Now I want to go TV. TV has 3, so I went from 1 mark to 3 marks. So which of these, I know they both start with 1. Now which one takes me to 3? T to U to V, 1 mark. So go along the side with 1 mark to the side with 2 marks. That's wrong. U to T has 1 mark. T to V has 3. That's what I want. So that's my answer. So triangle STV is congruent to triangle UTV. Okay. Last one, number 11. Triangle, I'm going to say EFD is congruent to triangle JDK, DKJ, or KJD. Okay, so E to F has no marks. F to D has 2. And then I finish up with an angle that has 3. So 0 to 2 to my angle with 3. So J to D has 2 lines, so immediately this is wrong. D to K has 1, so immediately it's wrong. Now this forces it to be KJD or KDJ. So again, both of these start with 0. J to D has 2. K to D had 1. So it was wrong. I messed up on my label. It should be J K D. Okay. So JK is 0, K to D is 1. Because that's different, I know it is wrong. All right, and then my angle at the end has 3. So my angle at the end has 3, and that's what I want. So triangle EFD is congruent to triangle KJD.